All right, welcome to another installment of the Life Happens podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Dotson. With me, as always, is Nick Nack, Patty Mac, Shawnee Mac. How we doing today, buddy?
Doing good, man. Doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. They're starting to get pretty creative. I like it.
You and me both. I'm always surprised at what we're going to get.
Today, we're talking about infrastructure, right? So, trains, planes, and automobiles, specifically automobiles. We're talking about roads and bridges today.
The big ones that affects everybody, right? Not everybody's affected by trains. Everyone's affected by automobiles, the roads where you're driving,
And every single person has said that little prayer to the man upstairs every time they hit that big pothole. Please
Oh
don't
God,
let anything be broken on my car.
Yeah, we've all been there.
We've all been there way too many times, and it doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon, unfortunately.
It is pretty unfortunate.
Something that triggered memory and really sparked this entire conversation, because usually you come to me with all the ideas and what we want to talk about, and this one actually was me. So
Purely dots.
just real quick, basically back in like 2015, 2016, maybe even 2017, I was at a local restaurant. Shout out Cello's, unpaid sponsorship, sponsor us. There's this guy just sitting at the bar and talking to himself, and it's not an uncommon thing because I also was by myself, so I was just hanging out playing Keno. And this guy just starts talking to the bartender, to me, to anybody that would listen. Basically just said, don't drive over any bridge in this state. Obviously, I'm talking about Rhode Island. And I was like, well, that's going to be tough because literally pull out of this parking lot and go over a bridge. He said, every single bridge in the state is structurally deficient. Like I cross my fingers every single time I'm going to the bridge. I'm like, yo, you might want to relax, dude. You're in a restaurant. Like, this isn't really the place to
just scaring people, man.
Yeah, you're just scaring people. People are having families are having dinner, and you're just in their face like bridges, man. They're gonna break. And so, dove into it a little bit, and the son of a bitch was right. So basically, according to infrastructurereportcard.org, government wrong organization, which is independent, allegedly, still gave an infrastructure grade to this country of a C minus. Now,
that's insane.
It's insane.
The government's own people giving us a C minus. Like, if they're giving us a C minus, it's obviously a fail. It's obviously a fail, and they gave us a C minus to make us feel
another
bad, right.
Another independent website, the S&P Global study, has us at a D plus. So we did all of our extra credit. We
last minute,
sweet talked the teacher, and still was only able to get a C minus to get us to where we need to be. So the reality is an actual D plus. Another little tidbit that was terrifying before we get into the actual meat and potatoes of these bridges is, did you know that a water main break happens every 120 seconds? Literally every 2 minutes, there's a water main break in this country.
Somewhere every 2 minutes.
Every 2 minutes. So in this show, there will be 15
water main breaks. Wow, when you put it like that, pretty messed up.
To say the least, because the amount of damage that shit that shit causes.
Yeah, it ruins buildings. It's like, yeah, you know, one break. Oh fuck, man! Oh, that's shot.
Yeah, you're done. You're literally done. But I'm just gonna rattle off the scenario real quick. Just throw some figures at you. Grab your pen and paper. If you're driving in the car, go back, listen again. Counts as 2
Pull
views.
Over.
So there are 607. Just to put it in perspective for the people listening, because you hear bridges, you hear infrastructure, kind of, which we've been doing apparently for 50 years. So essentially, there are 617,000 bridges in the United States. Of that number, 42% of them are 50 years old. Already,
so let's call it half.
Half. Yeah. Already concerned. Now, of that 42%, of that total number, 7.5% are considered structurally deficient. That equates to just under 50,000 bridges, which in the grand scheme of things, it's still 50,000, but at six.
That's a lot of bridges when you think about it. I mean, we're talking 100 bridges a state,
and that's
50 states, 1,000 bridges a state. Got it.
1,000 bridges a state for 50 states, which even
50,000
if that doesn't scare you, you have to take into consideration the 178 million trips over those bridges every single day.
It's pretty terrifying that it's that many. 7.5%. Like so I'm hearing these figures for the first time. 7.5% doesn't sound all that bad to me on a percentage basis. You say 50,000 bridges, and you think about how many bridges that is in each state. Granted, we could have some of the small little ones, right? The little tiny ones that whatever you go over so fast, you're on the other side before like your back wheels cross. Like
exactly, your front end's
fine. It could pretty much collapse and everyone's okay. But there's probably 9,000 of the other bridges in that state that are of somewhat importance, and those are also structurally deficient.
Structurally deficient is the term.
That's a scary term for that many bridges. And as we were kind of getting into the topic, I had like a general feeling on the idea. And I feel like our bridges and roads haven't really been touched since the 60s or 70s. And I was going to say that before we got into it, but you kind of back it up with that data point. Pretty much 50% are over 50 years old. So they kind of haven't, of course they've been upkept a little bit, there's been minor upkeep, but for all intents and purposes, they were built in the 60s and 70s.
Yep.
The cars built in the 60s and 70s are like classics for a reason. Like you can't you can't have a 60s Mustang as your daily driver, these days.
And have complete faith on it to work start every single
all
time.
The time. Exactly. You can't have your microwave from
because that one time it doesn't.
We're talking technology, but
that one time it starts or doesn't start, you're dead. So
yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
You're gonna feel better about this though. Don't worry. So while the number of like structurally deficient bridges is in the decline, thank God, our upkeep on fixing them has grown or actually declined to next to nothing. I mean, it's gone from whatever we were doing when we first found out, like when the country first found out, like, oh my God, all of our bridges are shit. Like, we need to fix it. So we call the contractor, we get the estimate and everything like that. They hand us a bill for, let me check the numbers here, $873 billion.
To fix them all?
Seems high. But it's true.
Seems like we could build a lot of bridges for that much money.
We could build a lot of bridges for $873 billion. Now, the average age for a bridge is 44 years old, so that's right in line with our 42% of the bridges over 50 years old, right?
Yeah.
Now, in 2009, so for all intents and purposes, let's say 9/11, so 10 years ago, right? Let's say
10 years back.
10 years or so, right? 276,000 good bridges.
Okay. Third.
To
almost half.
213, and this is their term, not mine, fair bridges. So in that 10 years, in a 10-year span, right?
Yeah.
Because we said they were built in the 60s, whatever. In that 10-year span, that number has intersected each other. They have completely crossed like two ships in the night.
Good to fair, you mean?
Good to fair, yes. To the point of 291,000 fair bridges to only 279,000 good bridges. So in 10 years, they've completely flip-flopped.
Damn.
Yeah.
I guess that just goes to show the age, though, probably. Like, say they were 30 years old. They're probably okay. But those last 10, 11 years really, did a number on them.
We are seeing what is an immediate crisis for this country, because it's like we ran our car, instead of like getting the oil change at 3,000 miles, we waited till 10,000 miles. Now the car is running like shit, but it'll still run for the most part. We've run it to about 80,000 miles. And
just topping it off.
All of our cars, all of our bridges are puttering out at a rapid pace, and there's nothing that we can do about it. Well, there was a lot, but
yeah, we could print even more money and throw it at the bridges.
And I think that's what we're gonna do. We're actually gonna line the bridge with money. The two states with the highest the two states with the highest percentage of deficient bridges, West Virginia, number 2, and number 1, the great state of Rhode Island, the smallest state in the union, number 1.
Oh my goodness. Well, there's a lot of bridges in Rhode Island. To be fair, most people don't realize how much coastline there is in Rhode Island.
The nut job
to this show probably does.
The nut job in Cellos was absolutely right.
That's crazy. When the
Yeah,
drunk crazy guy at the bar in Cellos is right.
yeah, who knew the surveyor was actually good at his job? Um,
Damn. Rhode Island?
so Rhode Island, number one.
Oh,
And
on a
I hate
percentage
to say it, but it's
basis.
not even close. It's
Damn.
bad.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, shout out
So
Jersey.
the problem is very, very clear. It's in the numbers and everything like that. So
Yeah.
let's just
It's one
add
of
it
those
to
things that everyone knows, though. Everyone knows
yes.
our infrastructure is shit. It's like one of those things we just accepted as a society. The U.S. infrastructure is shit. It's a running joke. Everyone knows it. People laugh about it. All the politicians say they're going to pass a huge infrastructure bill and fix it.
It's such a
But
load of shit too, because
continues to get worse.
they run on that like platform, and then the infrastructure bill that was submitted and everything else versus what actually passes has nothing to do with like anywhere near
As
what the
with
initial intention
everything.
was. Yeah.
Yeah, as with most bills in government and Congress. Yeah, it's
Well, we were talking on previous episodes about, real GDP versus, I don't want to say inflated, but like fake GDP, like the printed money.
mhm.
And what was the term we used for like 50% is just made up GDP? It's just printing money, right?
Yeah, it's like 42% right now of everything the US produces is made or produced by money that came from the government printing money, as opposed to like you or I earning money and then reinvesting it or starting a business or something along those lines.
Right. So that same S&P global study that gave us the D plus
Hmm.
is also offering us a little extra credit and a little help. So, um, if we were to invest 1% of GDP, it would yield 2% of real growth, adding
Wow,
1.3 million direct jobs into the country.
that's huge. 1% of GDP is, well, 1% is low. The US GDP in aggregate is a shit ton. So 1% of a shit ton is still a lot, to be fair. If we put
It's
1%
still
of GDP at any problem, it's going to have a big impact.
right.
So I just
It's
wanted to clarify for everybody. 1% may sound a little low. 1% of the US GDP, which I don't know off the top of my head, is a lot of money.
the number I'm seeing here is 1.04, like 1.04 trillion. So if we
Is
throw,
what, 1% of US GDP?
I didn't say it was 1% of US GDP. I'm saying that's the bill. And
Oh,
if
I got
we
you.
like
Okay.
that's basically the bill
The proposal.
to get where we need to be. Yeah. So if we were to invest that money, it would yield
Mm-hmm.
1.3 million direct jobs and
Wow.
create tangible, like real GDP into the
Yeah.
country who desperately needs it.
Yeah.
You ever
That's
think
so
it's
that's
weird? I was gonna say, you ever think it's weird that whenever you're driving down the highway or everything's under construction, but everything's
always.
structurally deficient? Like
Everything's
nothing's
always
actually
under
being fixed.
construction and nothing's ever fixed, though. That's the problem.
Yeah,
I swear to God, there's roads in Massachusetts been under construction for 20 years. Same road.
yeah.
It's just permanent construction.
This country's gonna be
And
great when they finally finish building it. That's for sure.
so let's call it, you said 1.04 billion, right? Or you say with
Trillion.
T, 1.04 T with the trillion. Okay. So we'll call it one. So we've printed enough money this year to do that project 3 times over already. We've printed enough money
Three
this
times
year
over.
to fix all of the bridges in the country 3 times over.
Everybody could have gotten
That's
their own
pretty
bridge.
crazy. Yeah, bridges for everyone at that point.
Twice.
And that's where I have a big problem with these things, and where it goes kind of to the next level for me is how did we get here while every politician that's been elected for the past 50 years has been claiming they're going to fix the infrastructure bill? How did we get here with the government going into so much debt every year, spending money? How is the government spending this much money? And we are in this situation with our national infrastructure here in the US. We're not talking about problems abroad that we try and help fund and fix. We're talking about the real bones of the US as a country.
Literally.
So how do we spend so much more and so much more than every other country every year? And when we let our infrastructure collapse, how does that happen? How do we get there? You know what I mean? And that's the
100%, because
mismanagement of
the
public funds by the government.
the ease of which we dish out tax incentives, and all the breaks for all these major corporations that very easily climb up into the billions and like we said trillions for because that 4 trillion, I mean,
The programs.
how much did the US population actually see of that money? Didn't we say it was less than a trillion? It was
It would have been 450, 500 billion if it was all direct payments to people
right.
instead
That's
of
right.
going to companies.
That's right.
Going for,
That's right. Every US citizen would have gotten uh, a payout that would have been about 500
it
billion,
was like,
and it was a $4 trillion
no,
stimulus package.
each person would have got like 50,000 times 380 million, whatever it was, 320 million in
Oh,
the
I'm
US.
saying with the $1,600 though, it'd be
Oh, the 1,600 they received would have been about 50 grand.
yeah.
If all of the money the government printed just went to people instead of companies, instead of getting $1,600, you would have got about $50,000.
But the $1,600 to each and every American was only 500 billion.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. The bill was for 4 trillion, so we're short 3.5 trillion, and we need 1 trillion just to fix our roads and everything else, so that people can fucking get around. Like, what are we talking about?
I know it's pretty crazy because it's so basic, right? I don't know how else to say it than the bones of the infrastructure is what it is. It's the most basic thing. If we can't, properly transport the things that we transport via the trucking industry in this country, the economy would shut down. People don't realize much of what we have in way of modern society is only afforded to us because of the trucking industry and the railroad industry we have in this country. Correct. If it wasn't for that, you wouldn't have your, $3.99 ground beef at your grocery store. You'd have to buy from somebody local, and it'd be $15 a pound. Like, economies of scale and infrastructure at scale has what afforded us most of the common luxuries that we appreciate in this country without even realizing that they're luxuries, like low price food at the grocery store, always readily and abundantly available. Like, that's not the way it is for everyone all over the world, but it is that way here due to the infrastructure we have built out to allow ourselves to live like that.
And we did get a hint of it. We did get a little glimpse of it during the pandemic because these industries were kind of not shut down, but slowed, like production slowed. Now, we saw it happen in the meat. We saw it happen in the meat industry. We saw it happen in grain.
So yeah, it can happen at any step along the supply chain. Like Ryan said, when we saw it in COVID, it was production constrained, right? The production shut down. Granted, people weren't driving, the truckers weren't out as much. There were transportation, logistical issues as well. Yeah, but apply the problem further down the supply chain. Just apply it at the transportation level of the supply chain. It still throws a cog in the wheels and screws everything up. So yeah. I think people the average person in this country underappreciates how important our infrastructure, our national infrastructure is for transportation of the goods that they consider, again, not even like luxuries, just things that they think they should have. They're like given rights, like there's air to breathe. There's always going to be abundant, affordable food in the grocery store. Yeah, it's not even a consideration. But without these core infrastructure projects being funded properly and seen to fruition properly, like that stuff is slowly going to go away, and it's only going to get worse. Everyone knows the longer you let a problem, compound, the longer you put off doing something, the worse it always is. It doesn't. Yeah. It's not any different for the government. The longer we don't take care of this, the worse and worse it's going to get. We're seeing it now.
And no improvements on the roads and bridges and stuff like that. That is really, like you said, the foundation of the country, because it does drive competition. It drives product consumption to the point where right now we're seeing, I just saw it actually, the availability of chicken is way down for some odd reason, like to the point where local businesses are saying, like with signs, guys, it's not we're not just raising the prices to charge you more.
Yeah.
Like, we have to pay this, and we wouldn't stay in business if we didn't do this. Yeah. We are going to see this happen, and it's not going to be in 50, 100 years.
No.
In 10 years, the intersection has already passed each other.
Yeah.
The decline has gone straight down.
So people have a hard time often thinking significantly out into the future or hypothesizing things that they haven't seen yet. So watch what happens and watch what has happened over the past year and what will happen over the next 10 months with the price of commodities, things like food and all your raw materials, lumber, cotton, wheat, corn, all the things we mass produce in this country or we import in mass. The prices of all of those things are going up. Lumber has gone up like 3x since COVID started. Corn
We
up
could do
like
a whole
2x.
episode on that.
So these are things that like they're the building blocks of the country, and we transport them around the same way we're talking about infrastructure here. They're core to the country, but due to the production constraints that have happened because of COVID, they've all gone up 2-3x in a year in price. Mm-hmm. So again, that's already happened. Take that and just input the problem somewhere else. It can happen. It has happened due to a different problem in the same exact supply chain. So just take that problem, put it further down the supply chain. It could happen again. So people tend to think like it's not a big deal, or, you know, it's been around this long, it'll be fine. But it can happen. And we've seen that now. And I think that gave people a glimpse of, like, you know, when we couldn't get toilet paper and we couldn't keep toilet paper on the shelves in this country, mm-hmm. that gave people a quick glimpse of how quickly things can go bad and wrong. And like how quickly the creature comforts we consider,
and how quickly people turn on each other. Like,
yeah,
I think that's the scariest
savage.
part, was people just throwing hands for toilet paper. Imagine food. Just
imagine if it was food.
A lot of like water was big. Like it can very, very quickly crumble. And the fact that the entire production line, now let's say an industry goes down, which it did, right? So meat or whatever. Now we're talking about everything, because you got no roads, you got nothing.
Yeah.
So I'll just end on this point, because this is the point that I want to hit home, is 80% of the investment for infrastructure is state-based. Okay.
80% is at the state level.
80% is at the state and local government level. Okay.
Interesting.
Now,
okay.
The biggest problem, and the reason why this issue has grown to the point that we are at right now, is because states are not required to disclose the cost of unfunded infrastructure projects, right? There are only 4 states in the country that do that. New Jersey is one of them. Shout out to the Jersey. Shout out the Jersey. That makes no sense. Shout out the dirty, right? Tennessee, Michigan, and the District of Columbia, which isn't technically a state.
They're working on it, though.
I was going to say, did it pass?
I don't want to be House, wrong. I think, actually.
I'm trying to not be wrong on our show as much as possible. And I don't want to be wrong on that one. But honestly, 80% of the funding for infrastructure improvement comes from the state level.
That's interesting. And the state and local governments are incredibly underfunded.
60 to 70% of the infrastructure projects, the desperately needed infrastructure projects on state budgets or dockets, whatever you want to call it, are unfunded. Not partially funded, unfunded. Zero.
Yeah, so 70% of most things the government runs right now are unfunded. 70% of pensions are unfunded. I think that's why we talk a lot about money a lot on this show, is people don't realize it
all comes back
how bad of a situation our government is in financially. And the one solution they have right now is really just turn up the printing press and print more. And so I think these issues kind of root back to a deeper problem in this country. And that is the state of the financials of our government. If you were to kind of audit them as you would a business, we talked about how they're not in the past, but the government's in such bad shape financially, and I don't see how we claw out of it. And the only thing they talk about doing to fix everything, including infrastructure, is just print money. And that is a dangerous world, because we're just living beyond our means.
Correct. And a lot of what we talked about, you talk about the financials, you talk about the mistakes that the government's making by just printing money, fluffing numbers and all this stuff. We're talking now to the point where the foundation of the country, what it was built on, mass production, our biggest exports and things like that, are teetering now. The fact that roads and bridges and being able to transport goods is now questionable. and we've seen a rapid decline in the last 10 years. If I can understand from a listener's perspective, if the money, when we talk finances, it's either like, not that it's over your head, but it's like it doesn't really affect you. It doesn't affect your day to day to the point where, like, when
Some
you're
people just
listening.
don't care all that much about it.
Correct. Now we're talking
You got that.
about your everyday products in your stores are not going to be available. They're going to be far more expensive. We already talked about it. Your wages aren't going up. There's no growth there. So you're
Yeah,
not making more
unfortunately.
money to counter that. Okay. And again, I go back to it, that 2009 to 2019. They actually intersected in 2017, by the way. Q3 of 2017, and I'll leave you this little tidbit, is the government, instead of fixing the problem, changed the definition of what it means to be structurally deficient
Yeah, that's what the government does.
in May of 2017.
Just move the goalposts, man.
Exactly. It's like the bridges, of which stayed exactly the same as all of
Yes.
Congress, everyone working for you because you voted for them, are just changing definitions rather than drawing legislation to require X amount of dollars to maintain. Well, now it's fixed, but maintain our roads and bridges, which should be day one stuff, honestly. And
It should
we grow
be.
more and more concerned.
And it should be. And I saw there was a figure you had put in the notes that I saw when I was spanning about how much it would cost. You said the bridge rehabilitation budget.
The bridge
14
rehabilitation budget is $14.4 billion annually. In order to
Is that a single state?
No, it's federal. Whoops. Sorry, I just moved you.
No, that's such a little amount of money for the government.
And all we're asking for, all the numbers equate to
22 billion, it says.
22.7 billion to efficiently
get
repair
things-
the backlog.
Yeah, to just like get the backlog from growing any further. That is such a little amount of money, people, for how much the government spends on like the most ridiculous things, that they could do this overnight and it would be.
You could find it in the White House couch cushions. Like, it's
no
unbelievable.
one would notice if they threw another $7 billion at this. I promise they spent $7. What was the figures we were talking about with the fucking stimulus package? There was 180 billion was the figure for
180
the
billion
program.
Gender studies in the Middle East. Yes, 180 billion dollars. We can't have bridges.
They have the money to spend. That's the problem. It is so fucking inefficiently managed. It is the problem.
Now we're talking about
goddamn government is the problem.
We are talking about real everyday Americans' lives at stake. And it's literally like playing the reverse lottery. Because if that bridge goes on one of your 178 million trips a day and you're on it, you're gone. That's just the end. That's just the end all be all.
Unless it's that short one and you just tip into the
correct,
half.
and then you're just back, right? But you pay your taxes, you do everything right. You don't run a construction company. You're not going to go out and fix the bridge itself yourself. You just continue to run the risk. It's like, what?
That's
are
the
we
problem.
doing?
Is as a society that's we like to consider the most advanced and the most rich. People like to pretend like we're the wealthiest society there's ever been, and all this. We're so smart and all this amazing stuff. We can't even take care of the basics. And I think that's a discourse that needs to happen that isn't. We just laugh about the fact that the bridges are shit. But like, if we don't start discussing it and suggesting solutions and changing the way we run the country politically, it's clearly not going to get any better. And that's, that's why people need to realize that at the core of a lot of these issues is the people running the country. It's not your job to maintain the bridge. It's your job to pay your taxes and those you elect in office to maintain the bridge. And they clearly have not done so.
I think that's my main point, right? To wrap it up, is basically 80% of the investment is at the state and local level. Call your representative. Call, email, just bombard their offices demanding that they take a look at this. I mean, it's insane and it's accessible.
Yes, so state and local is accessible. Federal can seem like this big, ridiculous blob, for lack of a better word. There's
correct.
No, like you don't know how to get in contact with anyone, but your state and local representatives, you should be able to.
You absolutely should be able to. And it blows my mind because we're already running on fumes. We're basically, we're doing a balance transfer on this US credit card that we made up, and we're keeping up with the Joneses when we're the Joneses. And we can't keep our roads intact. And when the base of 50% of our real, or 100% of our real GDP, never mind whatever we're making up on the side, is this production and transport of goods that in 10 years we could possibly not be doing anymore. It's not 100 years. I'm scaring the shit out of myself now, but but it's not like an idea that's 50, 100 years away based on.
No, it was 50 years away.
Right.
It's been 50 years. That's the problem. It's
Well,
50
then the
years
bridge
away
turns
when
100.
they built
We'll
the
have an
bridge.
event. We'll
Yeah.
We'll have a, what is it, Centennial? Is Centennial 100? We'll have a
Yeah.
Centennial parade over the bridges that are turning 100. Yeah. I want every politician to walk over it.
Yeah. Just you guys. Go.
But with that being said, not to scare anyone, because it's a nice light Monday, but honestly, these are the things. And this is why I chose this topic, is because of the accessibility of state and local government. Get involved, reach out, and demand answers for these decisions.
Mhm.
I can't say it enough, but sorry, before I close, do you have anything to add?
No, you're entirely right. Get involved, do what you can, and use your own personal experience. Right? Everyone knows that shitty road, that shitty bridge that is completely ridiculously, horribly underkept. Bring that example with you. Make it personal. That stuff hits home. But yeah, it's something we need to address as a country. And like I said, I think it goes deeper. I think a lot of this stuff roots back to mismanagement in government and the problems with our government overall. But that's a much deeper topic for another time.
Yeah, see, I was saying the overall theme. Yeah, for sure. And until next week, that is the Life Happens podcast here, yes. And it's the Life Happens podcast on all social, right?
On Instagram, on YouTube, Life Happens podcast. On Twitter, due to character limits, it is just the Life Happens pod.
Twitter.
Yeah, how they like to keep
it
short
Twitter.
And sweet. So, thank you guys for listening. We appreciate you.
We really do.
We'll talk to you next time.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.